The Honourable Pete Hodson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm delighted to take part in this debate, and I just want to say to the member who's resumed his seat that I thought that was an erudite introduction. I thought that for
evidence-based assessment.
A man who's come to this bill only because the Royal Society is domiciled in the bailiwick that he has the privilege to represent, that he gave a very good description not only of the legislation but briefly of the history. Let me add my remarks. The Royal Society in New Zealand began partly because of the Geological Survey, which itself had a bit to do with gold, and partly because New Zealand was trying very hard to be as much like Britain as it could, as soon as it could. And a lot of that activity took place originally in Dunedin North, which is the electorate that I have the privilege of representing. And it formed up in 1860-something, the member told me. 1867. And has been going ever since. I wouldn't say it's been going strongly ever since. It's fluctuated over the years as its fortunes have ebbed and flowed, and its importance in society has fluctuated over the years. And what happened, to cut a long story short, in the late 80s is that the Longy Palmer Moore government, which was going through a kind of doing all sorts of things in society, was going through a restructuring phase as well, and restructured science. And so DSIR came up for disbandment. And there is only 3 countries in the world which run science as per the DSIR model: New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, the southern hemisphere colonies of Mother England. And we took out DSIR, and in a bipartisan approach, which began under Tizard and Mathieson and finished, and Austin, Minister Austin, and finished under Minister Upton, we moved into CRIs. And that's where we are now. And so whilst we were going through this, oh gosh, let's try and create a bit of commercial drive on our science effort, and let's try and use a company model instead of a State Department model in an effort to try and make sure that science moves more quickly into the community and is taken up in technology transfer and IP and all that sort of thing. As we were doing that, we were also saying to ourselves, gosh, what's going to happen to the Royal Society? And we didn't know for quite a long time. And finally Upton, Minister Upton, in the mid-90s, finally got his head around it and decided to do this bit of restructuring, that bit of restructuring. And that's where the 97 legislation came from. But more importantly, we as a country started we as a government, the polity, if you will, started interacting with the Royal Society in a much more consistent and enriched way than we ever had. We're treating one another with ignore until then. So these days, the Royal Society is involved in delivering a range of programs of the Minister of the Day, whatever they may be. Normally, they do it extremely well. They get involved in stuff on a one-off basis. I'll give you an example. Trying to work out how best to get the PBRF to work. The Royal Society was very, very helpful. They weren't just a bunch of stuffed shirts that were conservative, bearded, greying, hopelessly cardigan-wearing, hopelessly introverted scientists. That era has long passed. It has long passed, but it did exist. And so Upton's changes and the changes made by subsequent governments has now meant that the Royal Society is a vital part of the mechanism of government, as well as being the home of scientific method, scientific thought, rational thought, whatever you may like to call it. So both of those functions in society as an institution and as a deliverer of services to government are now put in place and are pretty well settled. It's a good outfit, and it used not to be. Now, Mr Chairman, when
Pete Hodson.
Yeah, when we rejigged science, we didn't know what to call the Ministry of Research, Science and Technology. And so for almost 20 years, we call it the Ministry of Research, Science and Technology rather than the Ministry of Science and Technology, because we wanted to let people know that not all research was science and technology, that some research was actually, gosh, what can we call it, scholarship, and then we'd instance the humanities as an example of that. So if you took the sciences and you started with hard sciences of physics or whatever it might be, headed off towards the biological sciences, which are the sort of medium soft sciences, and then off to the very soft sciences, such as political science, but not as far as Scientology, which is not a science, then if you want to know what a science is and what a science isn't, if it involves scientific method, if it involves trying to remove variables in order to better examine and observe things that are not being that have not been taken out, or the confounding things that are remaining, that's the essence of science. And scholarship, the study of a poet, for example, has got nothing to do with that. So there is a very clear difference between sciences in their various forms and humanities. And humanities in this country, I don't know whether the member who's just trying to shut... Oh, no, we won't. I'll be nice. In the case of the humanities, New Zealand has very little structure. We've got a bunch of universities with humanities departments, and that's where the professionals lie, and that's where the PhDs are supervised, and that's where the humanities flourish. But beyond that, we are not big enough to have this, that or the other humanities society. There's no great literary societies in New Zealand, for example. There are some music societies, but not many. There's some. But humanities in general struggle in a smaller country. And so, for that reason, humanities are hard to organise. There's another reason, and that is that humanities are often done by amateurs. People who are retiring and writing a book about something are as likely as not contributing to humanities. But they're doing it at their kitchen table. And so they're not likely to be easily organised. For all of those reasons, the Society of Humanities has had difficulty getting off the ground. And when I was Minister of Science between 1999 and 2005, I was repeatedly asked by humanities, where is a home? And we came to the view that we should test the Royal Society as a home, and I stopped becoming the Minister in 2005, and they went off to begin what turned out to be a couple of years of discussion as to whether or not they could be accommodated within the Royal Society structure. I returned to the portfolio for 1 year in 2008, only to find that it was all done and dusted. And that's where this legislation has come from. So I want to pay a tribute to the tenacity of the people who have been leading humanities in New Zealand. I won't bother naming them. Perhaps I should name Neville Jordan, who was President of the Council at the time, the guy who in an earlier life started Marine Air Systems, in my view, the only serial entrepreneur in our New Zealand economic history so far. Not a scientist, an engineer, a technologist. And so he said, we can accommodate humanities. You know, I don't see why science can exclude anything. They certainly can't exclude me as president because I'm an engineer. And the senior staff in the Royal Society equally embraced the idea. And I want to just acknowledge that. It's important to acknowledge that some people didn't like it. And it's important to try and understand that too. But in the event, having an academic home for humanities matters. And that's why this legislation matters, and I'm delighted that we're making some progress. One last thing about Clause 1 before I resume my seat. We can't count. It's down here as being the New Zealand Amendment Act 2010. We'll have to amend that. We will. You can assure me that that's the case? Is that going to happen automatically? Perhaps it is. I hope so, Mr Chairman. Thank you.